Hannu Mikkola, driving this car, the Audi Quattro, won last year's RAC Rally. And this is the modern rally style. Power, speed and professionalism. Very different from the first RAC Rally 50 years ago. For compared with today, the 1932 event was a very relaxed and jolly affair. A gentle 1,000-mile run by amateur drivers in production cars, with the results being decided by tests around obstacles. But how did it all begin?
Well, it was the brainchild of a man named Captain Phillips, who was the chief executive of the RAC at that time, and he was very, very keen on motorsport, and he was looking for a motoring event which would attract nationwide attention, and he thought of the rally. So he talked with his friend Godfrey Smith, the then editor of the Autocar, and Godfrey Smith floated the idea in the editorial columns of Autocar, and the response was so terrific that there and then they decided to go ahead.
Another big difference of the pre-war RAC rallies was the prestigious Concours d'Elegance, where style, beauty and presentation won the award. Here's Amy Johnson with her Bentley. To win in 1932, you naturally had to finish, but apparently you didn't have to drive.
Well, a very gallant colonel is in the books as the official winner, and he achieved this by driving his car, a Lanchester, very, very slowly in a test to see how slowly a car could go at the finish. The only point is that the man who actually drove it in that test was his chauffeur, a chap named Sid Green. But in the record books, the gallant colonel is down as the winner.
19 years later, the first international post-war RAC rally, with special tests still causing problems. The mileage had increased to about 2,000, but the RAC was still a very different event to the demanding continental rallies, although occasional ghastly weather like 1952 toughened things up a lot. But you could make your own mind up about which way you went. To the right if it seemed a good idea at the time, or to the left, just so long as you ended up in Scarborough. It was the comparatively low-speed road mileage and the special tests which kept the RAC an essentially British rally. The Continentals concentrated on their press-on events like the Monte Carlo Rally, the Marathon de la Route, the Alpine Rally and the Finnish Thousand Leagues, although you had to shift in the RAC to get to some of the checks in time. Servicing too tended to be a do-it-yourself affair, which made it all seem very easy-going in comparison with today's concentrated frenzy by works mechanics. But in the 50s, there emerged one of the greatest ever RAC rally partnerships. Ian Appleyard, his wife Pat, and their legendary Jaguar NUB 120, with 2 firsts, a second and a third in 4 events. There continued to be unexpected hazards aplenty on the typical RAC rally route, and it certainly wasn't easy going. But the monotony of the format and the artificiality of some of the tests led to a general feeling that there had to be a better way of running Britain's premier rally and justifying its international rating. By now there were speed tests, but it was in 1959 with real long-distance endurance motoring and then 1960 that the breakthrough came to make the RAC one of the world's top rallies. For in 1960 the RAC rally went into the forests, the Europeans came and they loved it. Europeans like the great Swedish champion Erik Karlsson, who won 3 successive RACs, who married Europe's top woman rally driver Pat Moss, and who explains why Scandinavian drivers have dominated the RAC rally ever since 1960.
First, I believe, we have all the gravel roads in Sweden, even as main roads. And when I grew up, 90% I believe I drove on was gravel roads and snow and ice. That must help us. And I also personally believe when we started rallying here, we did it more serious than the English did. I think it took a long time, maybe up to 65, 67, before the English drivers really got it serious. When I met Pat and the BMC people in the end of 50s and beginning of 60s, I think they more play around, had fun and find the good restaurants in France and things like that. But I think from the beginning we started quite serious.
They certainly had all the practice that we lacked, because you try and find a gravel road anywhere in Britain, Even in those days, they were nearly non-existent. But one more thing, I think that the British then, the fashion with the big Heelys, etc., was a lot of power and big hairy monsters. And of course they were terrifying. And 200 horsepower in a Heeley was an embarrassment, whereas the Saab with about 50, 60 horsepower was putting it all on the road.
You had an incredible experience in terms of cars. You started with your Minor, which you called Granny, I believe.
Granny was a very sophisticated 1000. That rallied for about 3 or 4 years, which is unbelievably long time for a rally car. So it became so old it was known as the grandmother of all the other. It used to get axle tramp and fade its brakes and all that. So really, although I loved it, it was not a good rally car. My favourite cars to enjoy the rally and do well were Saab and Lancia, which are both front-wheel drive, and they're both, in my book, a pleasure to drive.
A rally car today in this special class, you know, there's nothing left of it really from the production line. In my old days, and I'm sure a lot of people say that he's talking about the old days, they were more or less a production car. Of course they were modified, but it looks like them, and you could use a lot of stuff from the production line to the car. And it even helped the car who was built at that time, you know. And today, what the hell can you use on a rally car in a production car today?
Eric's RAC winning Saab seems standard enough. Eric, compared with today's rally car, it all looks incredibly simple.
They were simple, as you can see. The most important was the rev counter and the pedal gauge. If you keep the height on the pedal gauge and the rev counter, you were quite safe with this old two-stroke. And you say there's not much to engine.
That is hardly believable that is an engine that has taken you to so many rally victories. 3-cylinder?
3-cylinder two-stroke, and this standard was 850cc. I find even now, when I had it out today, it is quick up to 40 miles or something like that. Really quick.
Amongst a whole string of Scandinavian aces, Finland's Timo Markkinen achieved a hat-trick of RAC rally wins in Ford Escorts. Swedish superstar Bjorn Valdegard took Escorts to 1st, 2nd and 3rd places. And in the last 4 years, the incredible Hannu Mikkola from Finland has taken 2 wins and a 2nd in Ford Escorts, and his 3rd win last year for Audi. The magnificent evergreen Ford Escort won 8 years in succession, by far the most successful car in the rally. But only one man's beaten the Scandinavians. British champion Roger Clark, first in 72 and first in 76. But even Roger rolled it sometimes. In fact, you'll always see action at the RAC. Watch Pentia Ricola emulating the old days. I saw action with Vauxhall's Russell Brooks. He's been knocking at the door of an RAC rally win for 5 years. 2nd in 1979, he could make it to the top this year. What does the RAC rally mean to you?
Oh, you know, there's no doubt about it. It's the most competitive event in the world. Every rally driver worth his salt is doing it. It's got more FIA graded drivers, 4 times as many as the Monte Carlo Rally. So to win that puts you really at the top of world running.
Why is it so important though?
I don't know, it's important because all the drivers come to it. It gets a tremendous amount of television coverage. It's the last event of the World Championship, and it's a terrific event to do. All the continental events are practice, of course, and you have to spend 4 weeks practice there, which is very expensive and very boring, in fact, for the team. The RAC isn't. We go straight into the forest cold and drive them as you see it, which makes for very exciting driving, and of course without the cost as far as the teams are concerned.
Russell drove a Talbot last year, but what's the car for a win next week?
This RAC is different to all other RACs. It's the 50th anniversary event. It's much longer. It's much tougher because you've got 3 nights out of bed. And I know how I go on these long events, and I think 3 nights out of bed, plus Wales first, which I know intimately, gives me a big advantage.
This year, the RAC is going to decide the manufacturers' world championship between Audi and Opel. Here at David Sutton Motorsport in Acton, the Audi Quattro team cars are made ready. And what cars! Computers, 5 cylinders, turbocharged, 350 horsepower and 4-wheel drive. Complex cars. So how do they keep them going at the service halls?
When the rally car arrives, it can only spend 2 or 3 minutes with us, and we've got to be as efficient as we can to put on new tyres, put in fuel, and carry out any repairs or adjustments the driver may want. Reliability is absolutely the name of the game for the RAC. So the car that you see behind me is being completely stripped down to a body shell. All the mechanicals will be replaced. It will start the event with a new engine, new gearbox, new differential and all new suspension. We think we've got the right car for the RAC conditions. It's wet, it's sticky, it's muddy, it can be raining. 4-wheel drive, in my view, is the technology of the future. Hanu won the event by nearly 10 minutes last year in a Quattro, and there's no reason why you shouldn't repeat it this year.
Now, there is no point in having a superb driver and a magnificent motor car if you can't keep them both in the event. So, in the RAC Rally, Audi and all the other top teams have service barges, just like this one, which contains enough parts completely to rebuild the motor car, and which also contains radio communication equipment which enables the crew to keep in touch with everybody in the team. Look at this, for instance, a mechanical Aladdin's cave of everything you need in case something goes wrong. Gearbox, differential, half shafts, lights, gaskets, tools, everything. And what a contrast to the 1930s, when in the original RAC rallies you could even take your caravan with you.